recording? Welcome to our presentation on the Colorado Peer and Family Specialist Certification. This is a new certification process, and we are currently in our grandparenting period. So we started with our basic definitions, and the certification, as it is defined here in Colorado, is a professional credential for people who have lived experience. And we have defined lived experience to mean that the applicant has a personal history of drug or alcohol addiction and is engaged in recovery, and/or the applicant has a personal diagnosis or experience of a mental health condition and is engaged in recovery, or the applicant has personally provided care to a child, youth, or adolescent with a drug or alcohol addiction or mental health condition. The importance of this peer credential is multifold. First, for peers, it is an opportunity to achieve and maintain a professional credential. This credential is recognized in other jurisdictions as well. It's an opportunity for skill and career development, as well as recognition that peers are a key component for behavioral health services. There's a benefit for the employers in that it ensures that employed peers meet certain standards for experience and training, and that will have potential implications for Medicaid billing. There also are benefits for state agencies and public safety, because it ensures there are competency standards and it requires adherence to a code of ethics. It also will enhance that accountability for public funds. So how did we develop this? Well, it started with the Behavioral Health Transformation Council. In 2010, they tasked a subcommittee, the Continuum of Care Committee, with development of a credential using combined core competencies. So we assembled a peer and family work group and defined the core competencies, and that work group then went on to develop a credentialing process that would include the shared core competencies for peers in recovery from addiction, mental health disorders, and family advocates. We went to COPA, the Colorado Providers Association, who already provides prevention specialist certification for substance use, and looked at how individual employers used their own criteria and trainings for those peer roles. So we started with the discussion about the combined core competencies, which was followed up by statewide stakeholder meetings in 2014 and 2015. We did a lot of research on various approaches. A white paper was developed by the Colorado Mental Wellness Network, and we looked at options to achieve the credentialing. We could have a standalone entity to administer the credential, which seemed to be extremely expensive. We could use an existing credential agency such as NADAC, the National Association of Addiction Professionals, or we also were looking at the International Certification and Reciprocity Consortium, ICNRC. The Peer and Family Work Group and the Continuum of Care Committee under the Behavioral Health Transformation Committee agreed unanimously to endorse the ICNRC approach. We took those recommendations through the Continuum of Care Committee to the Behavioral Health Transformation Council, and they endorsed our embracing ICNRC for Colorado in 2015, and that was pretty much at the end of 2015. I love this quote too. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. working together is success. This has been a process that has at times been extremely difficult, with a lot of strong opinions and ideas that have had to really be looked at and molded in order for us to get to this point. So let me tell you a little bit about ICNRC, the International Certification and Reciprocity Consortium. And it did take a little bit of practice to be able to say that easily. Anyhow, they were established in 1981, and they offer 8 different credentials in prevention, treatment, and recovery, primarily in the substance use disorder world. However, they do provide standards and examinations to 78 different certification and licensing boards in 25 countries, 48 states and territories, 5 Native American regions, and all branches of the U.S. military. More than 50,000 individuals hold ICNRC credentials across various disciplines. The credentials that ICNRC administer utilize the latest research and evidence-based practices. Every 5 years, they update their standards for all their credentials using people working in the field, and the credentials and the standards for the different credentials are looked at very carefully by the peers who hold those credentials. Each jurisdiction is regularly audited to ensure compliance with the standards of ICNRC. The nice thing, or one of the really nice things about using ICNRC, is that the credentials under ICNRC are reciprocal with other jurisdictions that offer the same credential. Currently, there are 16 states and at least one other country that recognizes the peer specialist credential. And each jurisdiction is allowed to set additional standards for people who want to take advantage of that reciprocity. ICNRC develops the exam that is used, and they use a professional company to develop the exams. They're based on formal job analysis. They are developed and written by subject matter experts and supported by what's going on in the particular field. Subject matter experts are helped by that professional testing company when they're developing questions to be sure that the questions are neutral and that meet the standards. There is then a 3-tiered review to look at each of the questions to make sure that they meet the quality standards and that they are accurate before they become a scored item on an exam. So there's a very thorough process that goes into these exams. ICNRC contracts with Schroeder Measurement Technologies to administer the exam. This is a national company with a lot of experience in this field. They administer exams for 40 different professional credentials, and they do more than 100,000 exams annually. The exams are computer-based, and so they have multiple secure and monitored locations throughout the world and through Colorado. A lot of the locations are connected with colleges and universities. But that allows the flexibility in scheduling and lowers the cost, and it also gives rapid results because it is computer-based. It improves the assessment of the exam and how the questions perform, because if people continually get a particular question wrong, it will be flagged, and then the company will look at it to see if it needs to be adjusted. Also, by having these exams computer-based and in multiple locations throughout the world, the ADA accommodations are available as needed. So people can be accommodated if they need a physical accommodation or other. They can make arrangements. And then ICNRC has practice exams and candidate guides available for most of their credentials. There is a candidate guide for the peer support specialist credential that is available on ICNRC's website. So the peer credential is the newest ICNRC credential. It was first administered in December of 2013, and it's now adopted in 19 jurisdictions. Each state is, well, I'll get back to that in a minute, but it's not all states. There are some areas within states that are their own jurisdiction. But it is designed for individuals with that personal lived experience who are in their own recovery from addiction, mental health disorders, co-occurring substance use and mental health disorders, and family members. The credential development is peer-driven. When they are looking at updating their exams, when they are looking at updating their standards, it is very much peer-driven. They invite peers from all over to participate in that development. And it is a credential that's intended to provide that credibility to the work done by individuals in recovery, members of the recovery community organizations, and those who work in the substance use or mental health field as peer support specialists. So the ICNRC approach in Colorado, the international agency authorized the Colorado board to issue the credential, and they provide the minimum experience and training standards for the credential. ICNRC also develops and administers the exam. And then they also will facilitate reciprocity between member boards if there are issues that arise. Here in Colorado, the Colorado Providers Association, also known as COPA, has been authorized as ICNRC's member board in Colorado. So the Colorado Providers Association administers the Colorado Peer and Family Support Specialist credential, and they provide administrative staff, insurance, and management of finances. Next is the Colorado Peer and Family Specialist Certification Board. This board determines any Colorado-specific standards for the credential. This board determines the application process, reviews the applications, and then issues the credential. So in Colorado, to implement the peer credential, we had to adopt the ICNRC minimum standards. Then we got to determine any additional standards, which we did. Any additional structures, which could include tracks for peers in recovery, mental wellness, and family advocates. We determined the application process, when the grandparenting period would start, and what the fees are. Colorado administers the credential. We evaluate and accept applications and then issue the credential. The Colorado Providers Association, or COPA, and ICNRC. COPA is a nonprofit trade association that was established in 1994 to represent providers in substance use prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. They host the Colorado Prevention Certification Board, which uses IC and RC standards for the Colorado Certified Prevention Specialist to Credential. And they also oversee they are Colorado's IC and RC member board. Now, COPA's interest in the peer credential is that, as I mentioned before, there are potential implications for billing Medicaid and other payers for those peer services. And there also are workforce challenges. Peers are able to do a lot of things that free up time for other staff to do other things that they need to do. And it's more economical for COPA to administer 2 credentials rather than just one. It is an expensive proposition to put together and maintain the database. So in September of 2014, COPA's board members voted to move forward with the peer and family specialist credential. So now their role is that they house the board for the peer and family specialist certification. They provide that administrative support, which includes maintaining the website and working with applicants who have questions that are of a more technical nature. COPA also provides the board insurance, and they manage the finances. As the administrator, they process the applications, check and make sure that there is proof of the trainings and that there is proof of the supervision requirements and the work and experience area as well. And in doing that, they also manage the website and the database. And then as the representative of IC and RC, they promote and market the credential and represents Colorado at the IC and RC biannual meetings. So here's the timeline of this the development of this. COPA organized stakeholder meetings to finalize standards in 2015 that included peers and providers. There is an 11-member peer and family specialist certification board that was developed in 2015-2016. We have developed an online application, modified a website portal, and began outreach in September of 2016. I mentioned the grandparenting period began January 9th, 2017. It will run until April 9th, 2017, and that is determined by IC and RC, not by Colorado, or the Colorado Board or COPA. So what are the standards for the peer and family specialist? First, the person needs to have a high school diploma or GED, and that has prompted a lot of questions that I will get to at the end. And then people need 60 hours of training specific to the domains, with 10 hours each in advocacy, mentoring, education, recovery, wellness support, and 16 hours in ethical responsibility. Applicants need 500 hours of volunteer or paid work experience specific to the domains, and those hours need to be worked over at least a 6-month period. And then for supervision, 25 hours of supervision specific to the domains, which may include group and or individual supervision. And the supervision will need to be provided by a documented and qualified supervisor. And then there is the examination. The applicant must pass the ICNRC peer recovery examination if it's outside the grandparenting period, which again ends April 9th, 2017. There is a code of ethics that each applicant must read and sign. When we get to the renewal, this is a 2-year certificate, and in order to renew, the applicant must have 20 hours of continuing education, including 6 hours of ethics. Now, during grandparenting, which again started at the beginning of January and runs through April 9th, the applicant pays the initial application fee of $50, and they will submit the completed application through the online database, and then they need to pay the remaining application fee of $150. The administrative staff determines whether the application is complete and sufficient for review. The credentialing board then evaluates the application and determines whether an applicant will be certified. Then the information about who has been certified gets forwarded to ICNRC. So then after the grandparenting period, the applicant still has to pay that initial $50 fee to start the application. And then when they have finished their application on the online database, they need to pay an additional $245 because that includes the examination fees. The staff then looks to, again, to make sure the application is complete and ready for review. Then the board looks at the application and decides whether the applicant is ready for the exam, is eligible for the exam. Then the staff will work with the applicant to schedule an exam at a convenient time and location. Applicants take the exam and they will either pass or fail. The exam will tell them that. The computer will tell them that right away. The computer will also let them know what domains they were weak in to give the applicant the ability to study where their weaknesses were. If the exam is passed, applicants are certified by the jurisdiction. And again, those names will be forwarded on to ICNRC. So a little more about the exam. As I said, it was created and administered by ICNRC through the company they hired. It's a computer-based exam that's administered around the state. And the applicant gets scheduled for the exam after their application is deemed complete and the board has met and agreed. There is a 6-month test window, which gives the applicant plenty of time to be able to schedule that. The cost of the initial exam is included in that application fee, that that second payment of $245. The exam consists of 75 questions with 10 pre-test questions to give the applicant an opportunity to see how the test is set up. There is a 2-hour time limit to complete the exam. However, ADA testing accommodations will be available. If the exam has not been passed, if the applicant fails, they can retake the exam in 60 days. Minimum of 60 days has to pass. And then the exam can only be taken 4 times, which is a 2-year exam, and the board felt that if someone was unable to pass after 4 times, they needed more training. So after the initial exam, though, each subsequent exam will cost the applicant $80. So what does it cost to develop the credential? Well, ICNRC already did the standards and exam development, which is approximately $150,000 to be done right. And they will maintain and update those exams. They also provide infrastructure that includes database and website portal. And then there are dues that have to go to IC and RC for every name that is forwarded to them. So the cost to the applicant is determined by the member jurisdiction. So at this point, it costs $50 to start the application, $150 to complete the application during this grandparenting period. After the grandparenting period, it will cost $245 to complete the application. So during the grandparenting period, it costs $200 to apply for your application. After the grandparenting period, it is $295 to complete the application. The renewal fee is $200 that is due every 2 years. All of these fees are non-refundable. They accept PayPal, credit cards, checks, and money orders. I have not heard that anyone has attempted to pay for the initial application or the completed application with a method that they haven't been able to use. So, the administrative support is great. So here are some of the questions that we are asked frequently. How are decisions about the credential going to be made? Is there a separate peer board, and who is on that board? What is that role of that board in relationship to COPA? Is the certified peer and family specialist just for COPA members or just for people in recovery from addiction? Is the certified peer and family specialist mandatory? Are we required to use the ICNRC Code of Ethics? What types of training and documentation will be acceptable on the application? And I know there are a lot of other questions. So let's start with those. So how will decisions be made about the credential? There are the IC and RC level decisions. Member boards for specific IC and RC credentials vote on issues. IC and RC administers the vote on issues. And then the full membership votes on the issue. And everyone who has a credential is a member of IC and RC. The Colorado decisions are made by the Colorado Peer and Family Specialist Certification Board. We have bylaws that determine procedures for that board. And they include board composition, voting process, board authority, and staff authority. And then we have COPA overseeing that process. Will there be a separate peer board, and who will be on the board? Yes, the Colorado Peer and Family Specialist Credentialing Board is housed within COPA, but makes independent decisions about certification. The board is composed of 11 members, including a representative from the Office of Behavioral Health. We have peers in recovery. We have several providers. We have representatives from the substance use disorder world, the mental health disorder world, and the family advocate field. And we have folks representing urban and rural areas. We have representation from the Western Slope, from out east, from the Southern Front Range, from Northern Front Range, and of course the metro area. So we do have a fairly broad representation on the board. What is the role of the Colorado Peer and Family Specialist Board, particularly in relationship to COPA? Well, the role of the board is determined by our bylaws. The board has autonomy to make decisions about the credential standards. We evaluate applications, we get to market the credential, and determine issues related to ethics and make other decisions related to the credential, in particular applicants. We have had applicants who have had a less than perfect legal record. We all get our lived experience somewhere, but we evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, looking at a number of different standards as the board. When there are fiscal implications or liability issues, COPA gets involved. We always need to talk to COPA about any of the financial changes that we want to make or any potential liability issues. So is this certification just for COPA members or just for people in recovery from addiction? Nope, it is not. It is open for anyone in Colorado who meets the standards for the credential. In all 19 jurisdictions that currently have the peer credential, it's used for peers in recovery from addiction and or mental health disorders. COPA has been told that we could also add a track for family advocates. When we started this, we were the first jurisdiction to add the family advocates. There are 2 other jurisdictions that have added family advocates to this certification as well. Is this certification mandatory? No, it is not. However, everyone benefits if it is widely accepted. It becomes more of a standard for this workforce. It also will help develop career paths. It also will allow funding for some of these roles. Are we required to use the ICNRC Code of Ethics? Yes. However, the work group that was developing these standards before the board was formed did enhance the original ICNRC Code of Ethics so that it does reflect some of the work that has been done around Colorado on ethics for the peer roles. What types of training and documentation will be acceptable on the application? Qualified trainings and documentation will be determined by the board and staff is our standard answer. However, there has been a training committee that has been meeting for months and reviewing a number of different trainings and approving them or not, or requesting more information. And we do have a list of those trainings that are already accepted. Some cover the whole requirement of 60 hours of training. Others are used with several different trainings to meet the hours and the different domains needed. As we, as a board, have been reviewing and certifying applicants, we have put the trainings that have been on those applications on our list of accepted trainings. So we are developing that list of trainings. At this point during the grandparenting period, the documentation has been varied depending on when the training was taken, where it had been taken, who did it. Some trainings have dates, some trainings have hours, some trainings don't. So we are going to look at standardizing that requirement for after the grandparenting period. So other questions? If you have other questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. Here is some links for some additional information. If you want to go to the application itself, that is the first email address. There is a how-to webinar in terms of looking at the application and what is needed. The application itself has, each section has a place where an applicant can look and see, for example, if their supervisor has responded or not, because there is a bar that goes from red to green as the particular sections are completed. And that is an excellent way for people to see what the application process looks like. You do not have to fill out the application all at once. You can start it and save it and go back to it. Here is ICNRC homepage, and that's where you'll find the study guides and more information about ICNRC. COPA has their website too, and then for those interested in the ADA accommodations for testing, here is the big website, and then you would need to search for accommodations for testing to get to that particular subject. So, and if anyone has questions, here's information for the board. If you send an email, we will respond as quickly as possible. The way the process goes, the email goes to the administrative staff, and either they determine who would be the best one to answer it, or they send it out to the 3 co-chairs. We have 3 co-chairs, one representing the substance use disorder peers, one representing the mental health peers, and one representing the family advocate side. So those emails are answered fairly quickly, although sometimes it is an answer of we will need to bring this up at the next board meeting. There is also a phone number here that you can call. Also on the application, there are places that give people the opportunity to contact the administrative staff, again by email or by a phone call. And I will say they are pretty responsive. It's a pretty quick process. So that is our webinar. Thank you very much.